from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton and I'm your host. And tonight we are going to have one guest and two parts because he has so many things that he can talk about. I am very pleased that we have Chris Efessiou with us tonight. Chris is a Chief Executive Officer of Strategic Pharmaceutical Advisors. He's an entrepreneur. He's a leadership expert. He is a negotiation expert. He's an international speaker, and he's the author of a book called Chief Daddy Officer, and we are going to start talking about that as the first part of the show. It's a book that he wrote based on his experience as a Chief Executive Officer when he found himself suddenly parenting his young daughter. Chris is a success story, an immigrant success story. He came here at 18 from Greece. He didn't even speak a word of English, and when you hear him speak, you'll realize that he learned it. He has been at the heart of a number of product launches, including Mucinex, which we all know, and in this geographic area, have been using a lot over the last 2 months with all of the colds and the horrible things that people have come down with. His writings have been published on major print and outline outlets, including the Huffington Post, USA Today Weekend, Smart CEO. He's appeared on all the major television networks, is on the list of the top 100 leadership experts to follow on Twitter, and he was the host of the Voice of America radio show Straight Up with Chris. He has his PhD in health studies. He is a visiting professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business and George Mason University's School of Management. So, Chris, I want to welcome you to the show. I'm glad we finally got you on. We've been trying to do this for over a year.
Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's talk about Chief Daddy Officer as the book, because I read it, of course, and I read it a year or so ago when I first started trying to get you on, and then I reread it, and I loved it both times. So the premise of the book, as I understand this, is that your success at work and how you run a company can be translated to how you deal with children.
Exactly. It's transferring skills from one part of your life into another. Most of us have a certain persona that we have at work, and we think we have another one at home. But when you really think about your day-to-day work and your day-to-day home life, they're not really different. They can't be. You're the same person. And so the idea of this book is to look into those elements that make sense in the business environment and transfer those onto the home environment whenever and however it applies.
But sometimes it doesn't. I mean, you quote in your book a Fortune magazine article that says, for all their brains and competence, powerful, successful executives and professionals often have more trouble raising kids than all but the very poor. Do you think that still holds true today?
It doesn't necessarily hold true, but it is not out of the realm of possibility either. What happens is busy executives, and they don't necessarily have to be way up in the ladder. Busy people don't have enough time to do everything that's demanded of them.
It's true.
And so we are trying to fill in the time, if you will, and bridge those gaps however and whenever possible. The problem is that oftentimes that means really putting a Band-Aid approach where surgery is needed. And we are doing quick fixes, and we're doing the default, if you will. I come home, I'm tired, mom is there usually, and therefore my daughter or my son comes to me and they're asking me for something, whatever that something is, and because I'm in the middle of something, the answer is, go ask your mom, or I'll talk to you about that later. A child, not unlike an adult, they don't need to be too many times, we'll talk about that later, and if that later doesn't come about, they will know that you're just bluffing, or you're just brushing them off, or you're just filling the void because you're just too busy. And unfortunately, after that, they're going to stop coming to you and asking you for direction or advice or whatever it is that's on their mind. And it is that's a fundamental loss in our parenting abilities, because we don't have too many opportunities to get into those kids' heads.
Right.
And the few opportunities that we have that are given to us by the child, himself or herself, we must capitalize on those.
Well, and you mentioned it in your book about that concept that you don't make a promise if you're not going to keep it, if you can't keep it. And that was one thing that when I was raising my sons, because I raised them on my own, that I was very careful of, because I did have that sense that if I say I'm going to do this and then work interferes or something else interferes, I'm just going to lose that relationship. And of course you were a single parent.
Yes.
You can't, there's no one to pick up the slack if you lose that relationship.
You're right. And that is both a wonderful aspect of parenting, and it is potentially detrimental if you are just dropping something and you don't have the follow-up to go pick up where you left off. Mm-hmm. And so, no, you cannot promise a child something and not deliver any more than you can threaten someone and not make good on that threat. Because if you tell a child, since we're talking about threats, not that I believe in them, because I think that most of them are empty and not without foundation, but you tell a child, you do this, and if you don't do this, this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the child does that, and you do not deliver what you said it was going to happen. Right. You only have to do it once. Right. And if you did not deliver on that, then the child will automatically think, how can you not expect him to? They will think that is what happens to me when I don't do what I promised to do, and therefore nothing happens. So what bad thing can happen to me? Nothing.
Well, when I first heard about your book, I thought to myself, how can you apply business principles or strategies to raising children? Because a lot of people, particularly now, I don't think it was so much in the past, sort of look at business, it's all short term. Mm-hmm. You've got your quarterly profits to make, and to heck with anything else, you sort of very focus in on profits. And when I first started reading the book, I thought, how do you apply this without ending up with sort of greedy, insecure little children? And you, obviously that isn't where you wanted to go. So how did you, as a business executive, you've got your 7-year-old daughter, now you're the primary parent. How did you figure you could actually move those over and make that work?
It was actually simpler than I thought it was.
Really?
And what struck me at the very beginning, especially when I became a single parent at her age of 7, was the fact that for everything we do in business, we have a plan.
Okay.
How many of us have a plan for parenting?
Nobody.
Nobody.
And nobody teaches us how to do it either.
Exactly.
It's a wing and a prayer. That's
exactly.
What you're doing.
So parenting happens by default.
Right.
And nothing that happens by default is actually worth the outcome, because when you default, you coast. And when you coast, you can only coast down. You can never coast up.
That's true.
And so I made a plan, and the plan started with me, not with her. And that was, what kind of parent did I want to be? Mm-hmm. And what was I prepared to do, give up, gain, in order to become that parent?
Well, that's interesting, because when you first said plan, you need a plan. I think people think a plan for the kid.
Right.
But you're actually looking and saying, no, it's you. You make the initial set of decisions. Is that what kind of parent?
Parenting starts with a parent.
Right. What a concept. So many people I know think that parenting is about being friends with their kids.
And here's another concept, that we don't raise children, we raise adults.
Yes, that is true.
The child will be a child in whatever age the state tells you that the child is emancipated, whether it is 18, 21, whatever it is, mm-hmm. They will be a child for those years. The rest of their life, which is by all accounts 3/4 more of their life than they were children, they will be adults. Mm-hmm. So you want to raise an adult, and it is that adult that will be the productive, uninhibited, successful, contributing member to society.
That, I thought, when I got to that part of the book, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because it gives you a different perspective.
Exactly.
And it is more of the long-range business type perspective that says, it isn't today and are they playing soccer versus baseball. This is more fundamental. So the plan, you look at yourself and you figure out, what kind of person, what kind of parent do I want to be? And then it's that long-range plan for your kids to raise what you define them as? I mean, when somebody looks at that, should they be looking and saying, well, I want my daughter to be a ballerina, and so everything goes that way, or is it a different plan?
It's exactly the opposite.
Okay.
You look at yourself and you have to actually look at yourself and identify what it is that you have that is positive to contribute to the child, and what is it that you have that you must change. Are you hot-tempered? Are you a person who has a short attention span? Are you a person that is by nature not a very patient individual? This is nothing negative to the parent. We're all human beings, and I certainly did not have all the aptitudes that were required of me to do that. But when you put those things, not necessarily on paper, but when you consider them with a clear mind, solutions do present themselves because you have just identified the problem. And unless the problem is identified, no solution can be found.
Right.
So if you are one of the things that I mentioned, then you have to find the fix to that for yourself. Because unless you are the right person to do that right job, the job is not going to be done right. You mentioned something about, if my child wants to be a ballerina or a football player or whatever it is, don't raise your children to become what you wanted to become and you didn't get there.
Right.
Allow your child to be their own person, because unless they are who it is that they are, they can never become anything else successful. So find out what it is that they have a natural aptitude toward, and fuel that in any way you can. And if your child is into dancing, great. Is attaining the status of ballerina the goal? Not necessarily. The goal is for the child to get to dance, have fun doing it, and enjoy the experience. And if they get tired of it a year or two later, then let's find something else. Because we all know, as adults and children, we all try different things before we cascade down to something that we really care about.
Right. That is true. And I know there are a number of people, and you see them, of course, with all this reality TV,
Of
with
course.
these stage mothers and fathers, as we used to call them, and forcing the kid to stay on after the interest is actually gone.
Exactly. Dad never made it to be the starting quarterback, therefore the son has to be, but he wants to be an artist.
Right. Well, we are going to stop there, and we're going to come back and pick it up.
Terrific.
We are going to break. Stay with us. We will be back with Chris Efessiou.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folk, but for others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton, and I'm your host, and I have with me tonight Chris Efessiou, and he is the author of, I'm going to hold it up again so you can see it, Chief Daddy Officer, and it's a book that he wrote after he found himself needing to raise his young daughter as a single father, and he was already a successful businessman, and he applied those techniques of business to raising a daughter, which is awesome. As I always say, I have 2 sons, and thank God I didn't have any daughters. It would have been a disaster. Frankly, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it, Chris. Let me talk about this helicopter parenting and what is now, I have seen called free-range parenting. There was in the paper a story about some parents up in Maryland whose children were walking home from a park, I think it was, and because there was no adult with them, someone called Protective Services. They called the police. And the parents ended up in this whole process because their children were walking home without adult supervision. How does that fit in the concept of applying business principles to this? What's your views of these helicopter parents versus free-range parenting?
It's a loaded question.
It is.
First of all, free-range parenting sounds like it's for turkeys.
It does. It does. When I heard it, I was like, "Oh, it's interesting."
Exactly. But let's look at helicopter versus free-range. Neither is good. Because a helicopter parent, by definition, is a parent who hovers over the child and tries to make every decision for the child,
right,
and not allowing them to be on their own. What happens when that child is 18? What happens when they're 21? What happens when they're 30? That child is incapable of making their own decisions, and they always fall back on somebody, and if that happens to be their parent, it's not necessarily so bad. But what if the parent is not around? What if the sounding board, if you will, is a person that is not necessarily having the best interest of your child at heart? So empowering your child to make the right decisions is key. It's the bedrock of parenting, as is the bedrock of business.
Well, how do you do that? I mean, we'll get to the free range thing, but when you talk about empowering your children to make decisions, a lot of people are, I guess it's because I know so many helicopter parents, they're kind of like, no, they know what's right, and my gosh, I've had all these years of experience. How do you do that in any kind of rational way?
Well, here's a news flash, and that is that the typical parent is parenting at least 30 years after they were parented.
That's true.
So by that mindset, then that parent is really 30 years outdated, or plus or minus 5 years, whatever it happens to be. So the parent knows best insofar that they know best what is right and wrong for the child, and they can bring that to the child and teach them that. It does not mean, though, that the child is not able or should not be able to test the theories. Not all of them. There are some things that, they cannot be tested. What is motherhood and apple pie? I would say it's not to be tested. But if your child is inquisitive, if they want to ask questions, like my daughter was and is, what better way to cultivate that, to create a curious individual, somebody who does not see life for what it is presented to him or her, but for what they want to experience and how it is that they want to define it for themselves. So how do you empower a child? You give them all the information and you pepper it with your own advice and experience. And you tell them what you feel, what you think is the right or wrong thing, and what you expect them to do. That is not the same as this is what you're going to do.
But in business, because your book is talking about applying business principles to being a parent, at the end of the day, as a chief executive officer of a company, the decision rests with you, doesn't it? So
the responsibility rests with me.
Okay.
Of every decision that has been made. The buck stops here. It stops with me as the head of a company, and it stops with me as a parent. And it should stop with every parent.
Okay.
But if we create an empowered child, much like we want to create empowered employees, people who work for us. We're creating a person who can think of their own. We're not creating a robot. We're not creating somebody who is just going to be a doer of things and not a thinker of things. We want them to be doing both. That comes with a very, very significant dose that parents have an incredibly hard time allowing their children to do, and that is freedom. That is allowing them to make mistakes. The key of any chief executive officer is to allow his people or her people to make mistakes so long as they learn from them and so long as they're held accountable to those mistakes. Not so that if something went wrong that they pay back for the damages, but if something is wrong, they don't try to sweep it under the carpet, they don't try to make it be as if it never happened, but it becomes a test case, it is examined, it is looked at from every which way, and plans are made of how we're not going to be in the same position again. It isn't really that different when you're dealing with a child, and the child appreciates it.
So you have a child, because we do want our children to be able to make decisions and progress along that line. They make a mistake. So the process, you actually have a whole thing of sitting down and saying, okay, what went wrong and how can this work, as opposed to you're grounded for 2 weeks.
Exactly. And you're opening up just a whole bunch of different things. The grounding and the punishment, most parents don't make the punishment fit the crime. I mean, I have had friends who had grounded their children for a good 6 months.
Oh my heavens.
What child is really going to take that parent seriously? So, and a child's horizon is very short. So 6 months, it's the rest of my life, I'm grounded.
That's right.
If I'm grounded and I don't do anything wrong, I'm being punished for something I did yesterday, so what stops me from doing something wrong tomorrow? I'm still grounded. So the answer to your question, you are discussing things with your child. And I don't want to be misunderstood here. If the child does something that is wrong, they steal, they do something that it is morally, ethically, legally unacceptable, you come down hard on them. First and foremost, you're the parent, and you can be their friend, though I wouldn't recommend it, at young age. And the funny thing is that if you are reasonably strict but open-minded, if they think they can have a voice, they will be your friend later because you will be their counselor. And that's how they're going to see you. So you don't come at them from a position of being the disciplinarian. You come at them from a position of being the consultant, and the person who has been there and has walked that path knows what's at the other end of that bend, and throws a line out there of how it is that, let me help you out. Let me help you not get into the same trouble the next time. But at the same time, get to the bottom of why did they get into that trouble? Because you might find that it may be something you, the parent, should have been looking out for and didn't.
Well, let's flip over then to this free-range parenting, where apparently, at least the people in Maryland, their kids were walking home from a park or a library or something. So is that too much freedom? Is that, where does that fall on the line?
It may be too much freedom for some. It may not for others. I do not think, for that particular set of parents, I do not think that was too much freedom. And it's kind of funny because if those parents were in the state of Virginia, they would not have had that problem.
Oh, so it's state specific.
It's state specific. So the child was only walking about a mile or so away. A mile or so, it's, to my understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, but to my understanding, it's allowed for a child of that age to walk on their own. And it was not in the middle of the night, it was broad daylight. And the most important thing is that those parents had coached their children of what to do, how to do it. They had played the game with them. They did a dry run, if you will. So this was not like the two kids kind of left school and happened to walk on a whim on their own. So knowing what we know about what happens, I would have far more faith in my own child to do something on their own after I have taught them that, and they have exhibited to me that they are worthy of that trust, than for almost anybody else. So, in the case of the free-range parents, leave the free range to turkeys and just get parenting back to where it belongs, and it doesn't belong with the state.
No, it doesn't belong with the state, and it's interesting that it can be legal in one place. And I know in Virginia, you can live like a mile from your elementary school and have to walk.
Right.
They don't bother to provide you with transportation, so presumably that would have been okay. Let me ask you, because there's some part in your book where you talk about parents as mentors, sort of in mentoring being sort of a business concept. But you've also said, well, they shouldn't be your friend.
Correct.
When they're young. Correct. So what's the balance? You want to have your kid come to you when they're older. What's that kind of balance? Does that evolve over time as well?
It evolves over time, but it never really, you never separate the two. A mentor is somebody who really shows someone how to do certain things once, but at the same time, they explain in absolute detail the form and fashion in which that something is done. It is not, you're not mentoring someone when they need to do a science project and you do it for them. That's not mentorship. That's really trying to get a better grade for yourself for your own science project of 30-some years ago. So the idea here is that you are teaching them in the true Socratic sense of teaching, and that is you are giving the hows to the child as along with the whats. Most of us are just too happy to say, what is it that you need? This, here it is. End of story. So mentorship is probably one of the toughest things any professional and any and all parents have to do, because you must teach by example. You cannot do the wrong thing and tell your child, well, I can do it because I'm the parent, but you cannot because you're the child, because that will only last for so long, and the first chance that child will have to just do it on their own, they will do it on their own. Because they can, because they've lost respect in the validity and the gravity of the parents' words, because they know the value of not having two sets of books. Right. So mentoring a child starts and ends with your own self-teaching, and then taking them through and allowing them to lead while you fall back in line.
Wow. All right, well, we are going to break, and when we come back, we're going to change topics. So, Chief Daddy Officer, it's terrific. We've only skimmed the surface of what it says, so I encourage you to go out and get it. We'll be back.
This year, 28,000 Americans will be diagnosed with oral cancer. Every year, 7,000 Americans die of oral cancer.
I'm Eva Cohen, and I'm an oral cancer survivor. I didn't fit the profile. I didn't smoke or drink. I had no family history of cancer, no family history of cancer. I was 31 years old. 31 years old. I went to see my dentist about a sore in my mouth that wouldn't heal. It was oral cancer. I had to have a radical neck dissection and a portion of my tongue reconstructed. I didn't know if I was going to live or die.
I'm Surgeon General Richard Carmona. The survival rate for oral cancer is only 50%. Oral cancer can happen to anyone. If you have a sore or lesion in your mouth that doesn't heal within 2 weeks, see your dentist. Early detection is the key.
Early detection saves lives. I know.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty, but one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
2 words for you. Pop quiz. Ready? Name any funny movie. A drama. Name a mystery. And one more thing. Name the movie your kids saw today in science class.
Know what really matters. Know about your kid's school. And know about your kid. Find out 100 ways to know more, do more.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton, and this is Inside Scoop Virginia. And I have with me tonight Chris Efessiou, and we are going to switch topics because, as I said at the top of the hour, one of the things that Chris has expertise in is in negotiation. And many years ago, when I was a young lawyer, I had someone tell me that any chance you have to learn about negotiation, take it. And so I said to myself, I'm taking it tonight. And so we're going to talk about negotiation.
Wonderful.
So let's talk about it. Now, is there a best approach? Some people say this is a science. Some people say it's an art. What is it?
It all depends on who you hear and who is doing the teaching. My personal belief is that it is part science, part art. It is the repetition of the art that makes it science. That means that once you have attempted to do certain things during negotiation, you have gotten the same result time after time after time.
Definition of insanity, I might add.
Exactly. It's also the definition of a reproducible end effect, an outcome, which is the definition of science.
Okay.
So any experiment is, if it's valid, it's supposed to be reproducible, given the same methods, means, and materials. And so if you keep doing it over and over and over, then that will become scientific because you will know what you're going to get.
So the good negotiators then are people who have the opportunity to do it all the time.
All the time. And it can sound silly, but the word negotiation is maybe a little bit overused. I mean, you negotiate traffic, you negotiate this, and you negotiate that, you negotiate the corner. But you do negotiate with your spouse, and you certainly negotiate with your kids. And if you don't, start, because you will end up negotiating with them sooner or later, so start early. So the idea is that it's what it is. It's the essence of giving and taking. And it is the essence of ending up with a win-win scenario where both sides are happy or not unhappy. A win-win scenario doesn't mean that we will both get 50-50. That's not, I don't know of a negotiation where both parties got exactly half and were happy about it. If that were the case, I can assure you that somebody wanted more than half and didn't get it. Right. So somebody was unhappy. But it is the idea that what it is that you ended up receiving out of the negotiation was within the realm of what it is that you were expecting to receive.
So some people will say, because you go towards the middle. Right. So some folks I have seen say, well, if you're trying to get a raise and what you want is a $10,000 raise, you need to ask for 20.
Right.
And then you'll end up at 10. But that seems to me, everybody sort of assumes that now. And I had this with, I was working on my sister's estate. She died a year or so ago, and we were selling her office building, and something came up, and they wanted a concession, and my brother said they wanted a $15,000 concession, and my brother said, we'll give them $1,000. Mm-hmm. And of course they came back and said, how about $7,500? Yep. And I thought to myself, they went straight to the middle.
Yep. And most people will. But if you are trying to do that, that's not negotiating, because everybody knows that they're going to end up in the middle.
So how do you deal with that? If people start, is it just me, or is it other folks who start assuming that if you're asking me for 20, you'll settle for 10? How do you get the negotiation off of that, if that's sort of where people think it's going?
Be the one that will surprise them, and will teach them that the negotiation, as my mentor in negotiation says, Dr. Chester Karras, negotiation is not what you get, life is not what you get, is what you negotiate. And therefore, that means that at the end of the day, whatever it is that you end up with, If that is what you wanted to end up with, or near what you wanted, you accomplished your task. So the average person will take a high number and a low number and divide it by 2 and end up in the middle. Because to most people, that's the idea of negotiation.
Right.
It isn't. What a negotiation is knowing what it is that you, Bettina, wants to accomplish. But more importantly than that, is that Bettina knows what I want to accomplish.
So before I sit down to negotiate with you, first of all, I'd have to hire someone else because you'd be much better than I am, but I need to figure out what you really want in order to have that assessment of which way it goes. So there has to be...
What is it important to me? What is my end point? What's the outcome I'm looking for?
Okay.
And you don't need to hire anybody. You can just ask me.
Really? So
if you ask the person, they'll tell you.
They'll tell you truthfully what their end point is?
They'll tell you enough to point you to the right direction.
Really?
If I want to raise the price of an asset by $100,000,
okay,
I may not tell you that I want $100,000, but if the base price is $1 million, I'm going to tell you that I want quite a bit north from that. So I have already told you that I'm looking for north of that and quite a bit. So don't come to me with 10,000.
Okay. So you have to actually listen to you have to ask the questions.
You have to ask the questions, and you have to be doing a whole lot of listening. Most people think that negotiation is about speaking. Mm-hmm. The more you speak, the less you negotiate, because you are not allowing somebody to tell you what it is that they want to accomplish. So if I'm sitting here and I'm telling you what it is that's in my head, I am spending energy giving away information. And if you're listening, you should be taking that information and turning it around so that what you feed me back is exactly what it is that I'm looking for, or within the realm of what it is that I'm looking for. So when people negotiate and they think that speaking is the asset, that's the liability. Okay. In fact, most people should be doing 20% speaking and about 40% listening with their ears and about 40% listening with their eyes, observing physical, body language, cues that they don't make a sound, but they certainly speak volumes.
Well, let me ask you about this, because I have a television show that I absolutely love. I saw it on Netflix called Lie to Me. Mm-hmm. And the premise of that show is that you can tell when someone's lying.
Yes.
So do you believe that when you say you should be observing, do you actually think that there are cues that people give you that they're telling the truth or not telling the truth?
I don't think that. I know that.
Really? So that's actually scientific?
It's scientific. There are universities that actually teach that. USC in California has a program in its law school that actually teaches that.
They teach it in law school?
Yep.
Oh, how interesting.
Indeed. As a matter of fact, I was recently I was doing a YouTube search on negotiation, and that popped right along with a whole bunch of other things. It's a professor of law who teaches negotiation to law students. And if you think about it, in the legal sense, lawyers negotiate all the time. It may not be for an estate, but if you're trying to get somebody out of jail, you're negotiating with someone.
And they're actually teaching them how to
observe
and assess whether somebody is telling them the truth?
Exactly, because most things, especially when you're dealing with people who are well-versed in fudging the truth, they are not going to sit there and look at you straight in the eyes and tell you things that you want to hear or don't want to hear. As a matter of fact, here's a news flash. Looking at somebody in the eyes is really a waste of time.
Really? Because people judge you on that. If you're not looking at somebody, they assume that you're being deceitful. That's not true?
Look at the eyebrows.
The eyebrows. Oh, okay.
If you play back that tape and you look at what you just did, look at the eyebrows.
Yeah.
surprise.
Surprise. Yeah, absolutely.
So but I could be looking straight at your eyes and not change expression at all. If I focused on that and not on your eyebrows, I just missed the clue.
Oh, wow.
You're telling me something I don't like, and I do something like,
yeah.
One side of my mouth goes up. That's contempt, which is different from what they term as disgust, which is your entire muscular structure changes, and it's almost like you're about to get sick. That should never happen in a negotiation. If you're there, stop it.
Stop it right then. Time to take a break.
Exactly. But there are, Secret Service is trained to watch out for what they call micro expressions. Those are tiny little things, a little twitching of the side of the eye, a little twitching of the side of the nose. Truly micro changes in the muscular structure of the face. Once that happens, they know that somebody is about to do something because they are thinking it. Okay. And so the idea of watching somebody is tremendously important. If we're negotiating and I'm like this.
Yes, now I've always been told that's a bad body sign.
It isn't a good thing, because there isn't a whole lot of things that you're going to tell me that I'm going to be open-minded to, because I'm just closed. And if I did this and I went back, that's equally not a good sign, because I've just disengaged.
Okay.
But how many of us are in a negotiation session and all of those things happen, somebody pushes their chair out and they think that they just need more legroom?
Right.
It isn't so. You have to be a student of people. And in everything we do in life, you must be a student of people. So be very, very studious as to what it is that you're looking for and how it is that you're receiving that information.
Now, can you, like with particularly these micro expressions, can you, as a person who doesn't want to give away anything, learn how to control all of that?
Absolutely, to a certain degree. Because again, it's very difficult to do if you're negotiating by yourself. That's why whenever possible, my advice is always go in a pair.
Really? Okay.
Always. I have seen the most successful negotiations come out of a team of at least two people, because it is incredibly engaging and energy consuming to be thinking about what it is that you're trying to accomplish and be taking all that information in and bringing it out. But if you have another person who is not speaking but observing, think about it. You are spending the time speaking. They're spending 80% of that time taking information in.
I love it. Well, we are going to be back in just a couple of minutes for some more on negotiation tactics. Stay with us.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me. There's more than just books at the library.
Il n'y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
I don't want to be hooked to a machine.
I want all the medical treatment available to me.
I wouldn't want my family to have to make this decision.
My doctor knows what's best for me.
An advance directive is your life on your terms. Talk with your family. Decide what's right for you. Then put it in writing.
Documenting my wishes today means my family won't have to make heart-wrenching decisions later.
To learn more, visit www.putitinwriting.org.
1,200 American youth run away from their homes every day. The National Runaway Switchboard is here to help. 1-800-RUNAWAY. If you are a runaway, Thinking about running away from home, or a parent or guardian concerned about issues facing your child, call us 24 hours a day. 1-800-RUNAWAY. In times of crisis, hope is just a phone call away. 1-800.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton, and I'm your host. This is Inside Scoop Virginia, and tonight we have Chris Efessiou with us, and we are talking about negotiations. And what we're going to talk about now are the 12 cardinal rules of negotiation. So get your pencils out, because we're going to spin through them here in just less than 12 minutes. So let's talk. First cardinal rule is about...
Well, there are two rules that are kind of overlaid.
Okay.
Over the others. Number one rule is be very well prepared when you go into every negotiation, and always have a contingency plan, a way out.
Okay.
The other cardinal rule is do not fool yourself that there will not be bad stuff that is going to be uncovered, especially from your side, because it will be. That's a key mistake that politicians make. They're not going to figure that one out, and then we find all these kinds of things. So air your closet, air your laundry, make sure that at least you aired it to yourself and you know exactly what's in there, so that nothing jumps up and bites you when you least expect it. So when we look at the cardinal rules, the number one will be that you never underestimate the other side or overestimate yourself. Be humble about it. Understand that they are as smart as you are, and that they too are here for the same reasons that you are. This is a chess game. This is not a game this is not a linear game. It's very much dynamic.
Okay.
So you need to know both sides. You have to be looking for a win-win scenario.
Well, how does that work? If the win-win is I want the $20,000 and you don't want to pay me more than $10,000 more, you get me to 10, that's not a win for me, I wanted 20. What does it mean to have a win-win?
You wanted 20, but 10 is better than 5, and certainly better than nothing.
Okay.
If I give you 10 and I didn't want to give anything, I wanted to give 1, well, you won because I came up closer, but I didn't go to 20.
Okay.
There are 4 possible outcomes in any kind of negotiation. There is the I win, you lose, you win, I lose, we both lose, or we both win. And the only way that you can have a lasting relationship, and we're not talking about buying a car or buying a house, which is almost a one-time deal. Right. We're talking about things that, and even though they're not large ticket items, because they're service items, they're very important. A plumber, a car mechanic. You negotiate the price to fix your car and you cut them to the bone. And because they need the revenue, they say yes, and they will do something for $100 above their expenses, as opposed to the $500 they wanted. Well, you wanted something less than $500, but is $100 really winning? Because if that person only got $100, gave you attention worth $100. So do you really want to be driving that car?
Well, how do you, and this is sort of the information gap, I guess, how do you know that where to stop between the 500 they want and the 100 you end up in?
That's a very good question, and it's a very, that's where it takes work, because you really need to do some homework. You need to know what others charge, and you need to have an idea of what it is that a service or product costs. Not everybody is going to put the same markup. Usually the larger the outfit is, the more it's going to put in there, because they're carrying large overhead and so on and so forth. Not necessarily always true, but most of the times. Hence the reason why dealerships traditionally charge more for service than a mechanic down the street. That used to be the case. It isn't anymore.
Oh, really?
Dealerships now are at least as competitive, sometimes far less expensive, because they figured it out. They are not making money on the sale of the car. They're making money in returning the customer back into the shop. It is the same reason that CVS, Walgreens, and every place that has a pharmacy. The pharmacy is never in the front of the store. It's always the most distant corner, because they want you to walk the furthest distance there so you can see the most things while you're there. Right. It's a science. And so knowing what it is that you're looking for is key. Okay. But in the interest of time, let's go to some of the other rules. Yep. So you always have to be prepared to give something up to get something else. You cannot go in and say, that's my deal, take it or leave it. Because 9 times out of 10, if somebody, in fact, 10 times out of 10, if somebody tells me that, they're not even going to finish their sentence. I'll be out of there before they say that, because that person's not serious. And nothing is worth a single price, take it or leave it. So be prepared to toss something else in. Concessions. You know, you're selling a house and they met your price, but they're asking for a point for closing costs. Well, you may not want to give a point, but can you toss some money toward it? Right. Can you give them some yard equipment? Whatever. I'm just making up things here, but you understand the point. Oftentimes, and this is really a bad cardinal rule for many, is that there are too many people who feel that they're holding all the cards. What kind of negotiation power do you have? I got you over a barrel. Right. Well, I think that's what a lot of people fear, is that they have no power at all, and so. But it isn't so. Okay. It isn't so. Everybody has power. And the person who is trying to negotiate a raise, as you had said before, you're not asking for a $10,000 raise. You're telling your boss how it is that you have made that work up and you are worth more than the $10,000 you're asking for, potentially a lot more, therefore $10,000 is a bargain. So again, what's in it for me not being you, me being the other party? Okay. Don't lose sight of the fact that there's a big picture out there. So don't take it step by step. It is not a linear process, it's dynamic. So and the other rule in that is that you're not shooting a still photo. You're shooting a movie picture, which is a series of still photos. So if you moved that frame out and lost it, you will still have a movie. Okay. And at the end of the day, you will still end up at the same place. No one knows what the moving parts are but you. Okay. Don't lose sight, as we said, of the big picture, but don't lose sight of the small things either, because that's where the devil is in the details. Mm-hmm. Whenever you have an opportunity to remove an emotional connection in between the other party and you, do that. It's very powerful. Give me an example of that. An example, I have never driven a car that I leased or purchased before I leased it or purchased it. Really? Think about it. You go into the dealership and the first thing they do is which one would you like to drive? Right. Let's get you behind the seat. So those 8 cylinders are humming and this sounds beautiful, and it just has the kick you want and it smells beautiful and everything else. Now you're totally invested, emotionally invested. Okay. And you are going in there to buy a Volkswagen, but they are putting you behind a Rolls Royce. Interesting. Can you afford it? Every time I went in, I never go to the salesperson. I go to the manager and ask him to get me a salesperson with a financial person. And I cut the terms of the lease first. Mm-hmm. I tell them which car I want, what color, don't care. Because the color may make a difference on a monthly basis of $5. It's not going to make or break the deal. Okay. But once I have a number that I know I can live with, then I'll go drive that car because I know I can afford it. Right. But the most important thing is they know you're serious because they know they have no recourse. There is nothing that stops you from walking out of there, and that's anathema to them. I never thought of that. I never thought of doing that. If you're selling a house or buying a house and you're in there with a realtor, and I know my realtor friends are not going to love me for saying that, okay. But if you're there with a realtor, the realtor really has a vested interest in selling the house.
That's true.
So be careful of what it is that you are saying and how much you are showing to them. When the last house I bought, I walked through there with my daughter, and whenever possible, we spoke in Greek. Loved the realtor, and she actually had enough class to make herself scarce. But there have been times that is not the case. So remove anything that somebody else can come back and use against you, that's something that you put there.
Interesting. Okay.
Have a line in the sand and make that line stick. There is nothing wrong with you walking away from a deal if that deal is going to a point where you think that it is probably costing you too much. Not every deal needs to get done. And the final rule, and perhaps the most important cardinal rule, is sometimes the best deals that you get are the deals you never made. There is nothing worse than having to live with a deal that it isn't in your favor.
And do people get to that point because they've gotten emotionally invested in it instead of watching that bottom line that you said?
In my experience, almost always. It's a macho thing, it's an emotional thing, I am going to get this so that you can't. And usually that's the way it goes. And if you drive yourself there, then you didn't buy something or acquire something because you wanted it. You bought it so that I don't have it. And enjoy it. I know you won't.
Well, you have, I know in your materials that I was looking over, you talk about integrity.
Yes.
And as an essential element in a deal. We've got about a minute or so left. Let's talk about integrity.
No negotiation, no deal is worth the paper is going to be written on unless there is integrity. And integrity is the true result, the true product of trust. So I have an equation that it says that if the deal is not good, most likely is because there was not enough integrity in it. And if there's no integrity, there cannot be any trust, and the other way around. If there's no trust, there cannot be any integrity. At the end of the day, and especially when we're talking about large things, you're buying a company, you're selling a company. One party is going to be acquired, the other is going to acquire, but you're going to have to work together. If there's trust, it works. If there isn't, it's dead.
Well, I want to thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
We will have you back because I just love talking about negotiations, and it's a marvelous topic. So I want to thank you, Chris, for coming. I hope people will get your book, Chief Daddy Officer. I'm going to hold it up again.
Or the second edition.
Or the second edition. Two different ones. So thanks.
Thank you.